In 1922, a silent film emerged from the shadows of German Expressionism, destined to become a classic of horror cinema. But behind its haunting visuals and chilling atmosphere lies a story of legal battles, the first of its kind in the history of horror. Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror, directed by F.W. Murnau, is celebrated as one of the greatest horror films of all time. Its eerie visuals and unsettling portrayal of the vampire Count Orlok have left an indelible mark on cinema. Nosferatu premiered at the Berlin Zoological Garden over 100 years ago on March 4, 1922. 9 days later, the picture opened in German cinemas and thrilled audiences with its tale of the skeletal Count Orlok, an undead, blood-sucking monster played to terrifying effect by the mysterious actor Max Schreck. Even though it was not the first vampire film, Nosferatu is arguably the oldest surviving one. Ironic enough because from the moment it came out, the film was constantly trying to be killed, from someone who claimed that the idea behind the title character was stolen. Florence Stoker, the widow of Bram Stoker, the man who wrote the original Dracula, claimed that Nosferatu was a ripoff of her husband's literary work. Because the 1897 novel was still under copyright, Prana Film, the studio who brought Nosferatu to the screen, couldn't legally adapt Dracula without permission from Florence, who was her husband's literary executor. After the picture debuted, someone sent Mrs. Stoker a program from Nosferatu's Berlin premiere, on which Prana claimed its film was freely adapted from Bram Stoker's Dracula. Florence sued Prana for copyright infringement, and the court found that Nosferatu was a copy of Dracula and ordered Prana to pay Stoker's estate. However, in a bizarre twist of fate, the studio couldn't pay damages because it had gone bankrupt during the trial. The court found that Prana had to pay something, and ordered that all negatives and prints of Nosferatu be destroyed. What happened after was a first, not just in horror history, but in movie history. By the time the court order was put in place, Nosferatu was no longer confined to Germany. Copies of the movie had already crossed international borders when the court issued its ruling. Movie fans around the world had heard of this horror movie that was deemed the scariest movie ever made and decided to find ways to screen it. In October 1925, Stoker learned that a London group called the Film Society intended to screen Nosferatu for its members. Event organizer Ivor Montagu had gotten a copy from an unnamed importer who had tried and failed to sell it elsewhere. After a volley of cease and desist requests, the Film Society agreed to turn over their copy of Nosferatu, but this is just one case of possibly hundreds of screenings around the world. Ironically, even Universal Studios bought an illegal copy of the print of Nosferatu before making its own, fully licensed version of Dracula in 1931. Illegal copies kept turning up after Florence Stoker passed away in 1937, and the movie was eventually broadcast on television. Today, most horror fans and critics embrace the silent movie that basically started it all. While no single original print of Prana Film's Nosferatu exists, film preservationists have pieced together fragments from the earlier prints to arrive at a more or less authentic copy of the 1922 film. Fatefully enough, these days Nosferatu is freely available on YouTube, and it's easy to find a hard copy on DVD because it is now part of the public domain. So, there you have it, this strange legal case of horror history. Just as Count Orlok rises from his coffin, Nosferatu emerged from the legal tomb that sought to bury it, haunting cinema screens for over a century. While Nosferatu may have been an unauthorized adaptation, it has certainly earned its rightful place in the pantheon of horror classics, turning a legal nightmare into a horror fanatic's dream.